police officer David received a report. A female body was found in the sewer. David then found a suspect related to the dead woman. Just then David received another call. Just 500 meters away from the last crime, there was another female body, and the same way as the last time. The only evidence at the scene was footprints, was also destroyed by the tractor. In addition, the technology at this time is backward. No DNA identification technology, so this makes it more difficult to solve the case. Until the arrival of senior police officer Simon, a university graduate. Only then did the case have a little breakthrough. Simon found that the two cases had something in common. Both were murdered in the rain and wearing red clothes. Then the police found a third body in a nearby reed bush. A third body was found. Judging from the modus operandi, the three cases should be the same person. Now the police have grasped the pattern of the perpetrators. So on this day, they had a female police officer dressed in red, ready to catch the suspect in custody. But after more than 2 hours, the killer never appeared. On the other hand, the woman was going to the factory to look for her husband. On the way, she suddenly heard the sound of someone whistling. She looked towards the rice field. Suddenly, the woman thought of something. She ran desperately in the direction of her husband. That's when the killer appeared. The next day Simon received a call to the police. This was the fourth crime, and the crime was still committed on a rainy day. But this time, the victim wasn't wearing red, and the footprints at the scene were badly damaged by the rain. The female officer here found an important clue. When the musician sent the song to the line can be, whenever someone on a music station orders the song Heartbreak Love Letter, there will be a murder case, and every time it was raining. Then Simon came to the music station, but the postcard had already been thrown into the trash. There were no cell phones in those days, so the only way to order songs was through postcards. It had the address of the person who ordered the song. Here David and his colleagues went to the crime scene. They said that the killer would return to the crime scene afterwards. What we didn't expect was that Simon was also here. He was playing the killer's favorite song. But then a man came from here. All three of them thought he was the real killer. Just as they were about to make an arrest, a colleague accidentally stepped on a tree branch. The killer turned around and ran away. The three men chased after him. They chased him all the way to the factory, but they saw that everyone was wearing the same clothes. Good thing David's intuitive sense led him immediately found the real culprit. The three of them succeeded in arresting him, but the truth became even more confusing. This man admired the real killer of the crime, so he went to the scene of the crime, wanted to feel the smell of crime. During several days of violent interrogation, Simon got an important clue. That is, in the town's school, there was a man who often appeared in the school at night. Then Simon came to the school to ask for information. The killer was not found, but got a strange clue. The woman told Simon. Every night there was a woman crying on the hill. The woman saw Simon, hid directly in the room, until Simon took out his papers. Only then did the woman tell him the reason. It turned out that the woman was in the hands of the killer, the only survivor who survived. But because it was too dark, there was no way to see the killer's face. But his hands were the same as the woman's, very soft and slender. Back at the police station, Simon checked the man's hand carefully. He found that he had the wrong person. He wasn't the killer at all. At that moment, the song was playing again on the radio, and it was raining heavily outside. That means the killer will definitely commit the crime today. Soon tragedy struck again. A sixth victim appeared. The lower half of his body was stuffed with peaches. The method was extremely cruel. While the two were worrying about the case, the music station found the postcard. It recorded the address and name of the real killer. Then the police followed the clues on the postcard, finally caught the brutal murderer. His name was Henry. He was a soldier in Korea. He looked like a young man. Soon after he came to the town, a murder occurred, and he was the one who ordered the music on the radio. All the features pointed to him, since there was no direct evidence to prove that he was the murderer. Seeing the real murderer in front of his eyes and unable to do anything about it, Simon became very violent. The colleague behind him kicked Henry directly, but at that moment, the crime unit found the killer's body fluids on the victim. But since there was no DNA identification technology in Korea at that time, the evidence had to be sent to the United States for identification. A few months later, David's wife came home from work, walking on a deserted road. It was pitch black all around. A figure appeared in the forest high above. At that moment, a female student came, and David's wife was passing by, and the killer changed his target to the 14-year-old student. The next day, it was raining heavily at the crime scene. The coroner vomited on the side after looking at the body. The victim had a dozen ballpoint pens in his body. The crime was extremely brutal. Officer Simon on the sidelines, looking at the young girl, took the initiative to help her pull up the clothes around her waist. At this moment, Simon could no longer control himself. He found Henry, ready to kill him with one shot. When he saw that the murderer was about to be finished by himself, David brought the DNA report. Simon looked at the report in front of him. He was dumbfounded. At that moment, Officer Simon went into a frenzy. Then he threw the identification report. Then he drew his weapon, ready to bring the real killer to justice. But David stopped him. He squeezed the killer's face to see if he could use his instincts, to see if he was the real killer. But at that moment, David couldn't see anything. Then the train behind them came towards them, forcing the three apart. Crazy Simon shot at Henry, but it was too late. Maybe a lot of truths are not meant to come to the surface, like in a long tunnel. You can never see where the end is. 10 years later, David became a businessman and had a son and a daughter. The family of 4 was very happy and prosperous. One day David was on his way to visit his family in the countryside. He passed by the golden rice field back then. He couldn't help but go to the location of the first female corpse. Then he looked down at it. His mind was filled with memories. But then a little girl interrupted all this.
근데 왜 봐요?
그냥 좀 봤다.
되게 신기하다.
뭐가?
얼마 전에도 어떤 아저씨가 여기서 이 구멍을 들여다보고 있어.
그 아저씨 얼굴 봤어?
뻔한 얼굴인데?
Someone said this scene. David was looking at the murderer in front of the screen. The killer is watching the movie, and the murderer may be you in front of the screen.